The first bolt of lightning came without warning, slamming into the group with a force that left them stunned. Bruce felt his legs go numb. As we explore the most tragic incidents at Yosemite, we'll uncover how quickly a peaceful day in nature can turn into a nightmare. Viewer discretion is advised. On July 10, 1996, at 6:52 p.m., an unforgettable and devastating event occurred in Yosemite National Park, one that still haunts the memories of those who were there. The peaceful evening in the Happy Isles area was shattered by a deafening roar. From high above on Glacier Point, two colossal blocks of granite with a combined volume of 30,000 cubic meters broke free from the rock face. These blocks, weighing around 90,000 tons, tumbled down with unstoppable force, crashing into the valley floor below. To put the scale into perspective, imagine 2,000 SUVs plummeting from the heights simultaneously. As the massive rocks struck the ground, they unleashed an air blast so powerful that it rivaled the wind speeds of a Category 5 hurricane or an F5 tornado. The wind reached up to 280 miles per hour, turning the tranquil area into a scene of utter chaos. The force of the air blast was so intense that it uprooted and snapped more than 1,000 trees, which were flung around like matchsticks. Buildings in the Happy Isles area were crushed under the debris, and during the destruction, one person tragically lost their life. Several others suffered serious injuries as they were caught in the whirlwind of rock, dust, and broken trees. Those who survived described the scene as apocalyptic. A dense cloud of pulverized rock rose into the air, blocking out the sun and plunging the area into darkness for several minutes. The search and rescue efforts that followed were nothing short of heroic. Rescuers faced suffocating dust and unstable conditions as they combed through the debris, looking for victims. The scale of destruction made the search incredibly difficult, yet remarkably, no further casualties were found. Still, the devastation was overwhelming. If the rockfall had occurred just a few hours earlier when the area was more crowded, the death toll would have been far higher. The 1996 Happy Isles rockfall remains one of the most destructive natural disasters in Yosemite's history, and while the park recovered from this tragedy, the scars left behind, both on the landscape and in the memories of those who witnessed it, will never fade. But the smallest of mistakes can also lead to such dire consequences. On September 28, 2023, an experienced Korean climbing instructor led several of his students on the iconic nose route up the towering granite walls of El Capitan, a popular challenge among seasoned climbers. It was supposed to be a routine descent after a long day of teaching, but he made one simple mistake. The instructor led the group down from Sickle Ledge, a platform approximately 400 feet above the ground, and rappelled down to set fixed lines for his students. However, in his haste, he failed to tie a stopper knot at the end of his rope. As he rappelled down, the stopper knot would have stopped him and made him realize he was at the end of his rope. Without it, though, he plunged to the ground at terrifying speed. Eyewitnesses described the horrific scene that followed. One hiker just feet from where the climber landed recalled the sickening thud of his body hitting the ground. The impact was so violent that debris from the fall sprayed over the surrounding area. Another climber who had witnessed many accidents before was left shaken by the sheer force and speed of the fall. Despite his years of experience, the instructor's mistake had cost him his life. Rappelling accidents are responsible for nearly 30% of climbing-related fatalities, and even the most skilled climbers aren't immune to the consequences of a momentary lapse in judgment. As rescue teams arrived to retrieve the body, the gravity of the situation hung heavy over El Capitan. The instructor's students, who had looked to him for guidance, were left to grapple with the reality of the loss. It's intuitive that climbing holds such risks, but apparently, selfies do too. On September 5, 2018, 18-year-old Tomer Frankfurter from Israel was hiking along the popular Mist Trail in Yosemite National Park. His destination was Nevada Fall, a stunning waterfall that attracts thousands of visitors each year. The young adventurer was nearing the end of a 2-month trip to the United States, one last adventure before returning to Israel to begin his military service. Excited to document the moment, Tomer decided to take a selfie at the edge of the waterfall. But as he edged closer to the precipice for the perfect shot, his foot slipped on a slick rock and he lost his balance. The water sent him over the edge, plummeting over 800 feet to the jagged rocks below. Other hikers saw the scene unfold. One moment, Tomer had been smiling for the camera, and in the next, he was gone. Rescue teams arrived swiftly, but there was little they could do. Tomer's body was recovered from the rocky area beneath the falls, and the news of his death quickly spread through the park. His mother, devastated by the loss, shared that Tomer had always been an adventurous spirit, eager to explore the world before his military service. A trip to Yosemite had always been a dream of his. It is unfortunate that many family vacations lead to such haunting memories, just like for the Adams. On August 15, 2012, the Adams family was taking a family vacation in Yosemite. It was a hot day as they hiked along Mist Trail to one of Yosemite's most popular waterfalls, Vernal Falls. As they continued on the trail, they came to a footbridge across the Merced River. The family decided to wade into the river here to cool off where the water was calm. But in the middle of a river channel, the current can be deceptive. The two boys were playing in a shallow area of the river, but were swept away down the river in moments. Their mother tried to rescue them, but she too was swept away. Rescue efforts began immediately. Later, in the same afternoon, the older boy of 10 was found in the river only 150 yards downstream. They tried to resuscitate him, but without success. The mother too was found downriver. She had survived, and they pulled her out unable to on her own with injuries to her back, and she was rushed to the hospital. But the younger 6-year-old boy could not be found. Rescue efforts continued though with little hope. Days later, he was found dead. There is no signage at this footbridge warning about the river, although there are warnings earlier at the trailhead. There are many places along the trails that can be dangerous, and these are not limited to the ones with explicit warning signs. And these weren't even the only ones to have died in this river. Earlier in the year, a 57-year-old man had drowned in the same river, and a fourth had died in another river of Yosemite. Rivers aside, you can still encounter quite a few dangers on the trails themselves. On July 7, 2024, John Kyle Moore from June Lake was running 50 miles on his own across the Sierra Mountains into Yosemite. He had been running for over 16 hours and was less than a mile from the end of his run. He had reached the Yosemite Valley, one of the most popular areas of the park, near Vernal Falls. He was on the road, hot and tired, when a huge black bear popped out of the bushes and charged at him, striking his shoulder. He stumbled away and saw the bear a few yards away from him. The bear started towards him again, and John started yelling and slapping his running poles against the pavement to scare it away. There were others nearby too who saw what happened. They grabbed their pots and pans and started making as much noise as they could, and soon the bear fled back into the woods. An ambulance arrived. They patched up his bandaged arm, but that had been his only wounds. He was lucky so many others were nearby. Such attacks are very rare in Yosemite, especially without any provocation. Just as you normally expect trails to be safe, you'd also think a cave would be a safe place to wait out a storm. On September 21, 2023, Jordan Dean and Josh Van Dyke had set their sights on Yosemite's iconic Half Dome, eager to conquer the famous cables and reach the summit. But as they ascended the slick rock, clouds began to gather ominously overhead. The first clap of thunder echoed through the valley, sending a chill down their spines. They weren't alone on the cables. Other hikers had also braved the climb, now trapped in a rapidly worsening storm. The rain began to pour, making the granite surface treacherously slick. The cables, meant to be a lifeline, were now slippery as well. Seeking shelter, Jordan and Josh, along with a few other hikers, huddled in a small cave, hoping to ride out the storm. But a cave only protects you from the rain. A sudden flash of lightning struck the rock above them, sending a jolt through the cave. Jordan felt the shock shoot through his knee, and another hiker was knocked unconscious by the blast. Panic set in as they tried to revive the unconscious hiker, their hands trembling with fear. After a minute, he awoke. Outside the cave, the storm raged on, and the prospect of descending the mountain became more terrifying by the minute. Eventually, the group managed to climb down, but the experience left them shaken to the core. They were lucky. Not all survived being struck by lightning. Like on July 27, 1985, Bruce Viner, an engineer from Massachusetts, had reached the summit of Yosemite's Half Dome for the first time after a grueling 13-kilometer hike that gained nearly 1,500 meters in elevation. He was exhausted, dehydrated, but exhilarated. The thrill of standing at the peak, surrounded by nature's beauty, made the struggle worth it. But as Bruce and his friends, Bob Frith, Adrian Esteban, and Tom Rice, stood admiring the view, the skies above them began to darken. The air thickened with the promise of a storm. They had been told there was a small rock enclosure on the summit that would provide shelter if things turned bad. Confident in their plan, they pressed on, unaware that danger was already brewing overhead. By the time they reached the rock shelter, the storm was upon them. Bruce, Bob, Adrian, Tom, and a teenager named Brian Jordan huddled inside, hoping to wait out the worst of it. The first bolt of lightning came without warning, slamming into the group with a force that left them stunned. Bruce felt his legs go numb. At first, he thought it was the propane stove exploding, but as the numbness spread, the reality hit him. They had been struck by lightning. The aftermath was immediate chaos. Adrian couldn't feel his legs either. Tom and Brian lay motionless. Bob, sitting precariously near a 600-meter drop, convulsed from the residual charge of the lightning strike. Bruce and Adrian, despite their own injuries, lunged toward him, desperately trying to pull him to safety. But their legs were useless, and they could only watch in horror as a final seizure hurled Bob over the edge into the abyss. Grief-stricken, Bruce sobbed, but there was no time for sorrow. As he grappled with the shock of his friend's death, another bolt of lightning struck. This time, Bruce's world shifted. His body was thrown into agony, and for a moment, he found himself looking down at his own form, hovering between life and death. He knew that if he let go entirely, it would be the end. Bruce felt his consciousness return to his body, and the pain he now felt was excruciating. His legs and lower back were seared by the lightning, the skin stripped away like it had been hacked with a blade. Every breath sent waves of agony through his chest. He could barely move, terrified that a third strike would finish him off. Inside the enclosure, the teenager Brian never regained consciousness. Tom eventually came to, but he was weak and disoriented. As the skies cleared, hikers began to arrive at the summit for sunset, unaware of the horror that had just unfolded. Among the new arrivals were several emergency medical technicians, EMTs, who immediately began treating the survivors. Bruce's pulse was weak, his body cold and trembling. He had severe burns, internal injuries, and his lungs began to fill with fluid. By midnight, a daring helicopter rescue was underway, something never before attempted on Half Dome at night. Veteran pilot Al Major executed a perfect landing, saving Bruce and Tom from certain death. They were flown to UC Davis Medical Center, where doctors worked around the clock to repair their broken bodies. It was weeks before they could walk again, and even then, the road to recovery was long and painful. For years, Bruce endured nerve pain, kidney problems, and the emotional scars of losing his best friend. Which of these stories did you find most tragic? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed hearing these stories, please subscribe. It really helps us provide more stories like these. See ya!